Okay, it says it's live.
Okay, let's give it one smile. Okay, let's give it 1 minute just to kind of buffer, and then I'll get started.
Oh, but there's already people in the Q&A, I see.
Yeah, I see that as well. Okay. All right. Should we go ahead and get started?
Sure, it looks like people are here, and I'm guessing that we've actually started, so go ahead.
Okay. Hi, everyone. We're so happy that you're joining us for this live event, this Hangout on Air with Eric and other core staff members as well. We're really glad you're here. We're looking forward to taking a closer look at 2 final projects. We're also going to do some Q&A, and we may talk a little bit about evaluation depending on how Eric is feeling as well. So just one thing I wanted to let you know is just make sure that you're logged in to edX and also to the forums. We've posted a link in the showcase. So to access the showcase, there's at the top of your screen an icon that looks like 9 little small boxes. If you click that, you'll be able to access both the Q&A and also the showcase. So if you go to the showcase now, you'll see the link to the first project. Okay.
And I'll also add that the showcase is for whatever reason, the icon that looks like some price tags. I guess, I don't know. It's going to come with an explanation for that. I got none.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So we'll let everybody a second to do that. So the format will be we asked for some volunteers to go through some of their final projects. So we'll start with a couple of those. A couple of the volunteers that had some projects. I'm just pointing out some various aspects of those. I'll try to do it while you're able to look at those projects as well through those links. And then after that, we'll just sort of open it up to questions and answers that have to do with particularly things that have to do with evaluation and sort of the end of the course. But if there's other things that people are curious about, we're sort of happy to entertain those questions as well. All right, I'm assuming everybody's onto their first link. So what I'm going to do is actually, I'm going to share, attempt to share, see if this works. So this is one of the final projects from Brian Y. And Brian's project is an interesting project, and it also you'll see on the website has a video presentation. So I'm going to just sort of scroll through parts of this, but Brian has put together a nice walkthrough of the presentation himself. As you'll see here, one of the other interesting things about this project, and I think for me the course in general has been, and I've mentioned this in some of the weekly updates, is the great diversity of places and people and goals that everybody has in sort of implementing their educational technologies. At least when I thought about the course, I thought about sort of very traditional classrooms and different ways we approach that, and that also has its own challenges. And then when I saw the kinds of projects and discussions that were going on as people talked about their own work, that was part of what was going on, but there's a lot of other kinds of people's places, technologies that people were considering as they were bringing technologies into other kinds of places. So as I mentioned, so this one is about bringing virtual education to the Arctic. Whoa, sorry about that. That was a fast scroll. Some of the nice thing, again, here is that it is a really interesting context, and Brian has done a nice job really explaining what are the real important constraints on this community. So, for example, the schools have computers, but internet access is expensive and bandwidth is limited. So these are real challenges, as well as sort of challenges around who the population is and how we're reaching them. So this is these are spread out communities, in the Arctic region. And the goal here was to really look at potential learning management systems to think about ways that virtual education can be brought to those communities. And Blackboard was among the considerations. We really like this sort of flow chart here. it may be a little bit small on the screen as you're watching it for me, but if you've actually clicked on the link, you should be able to see, you should be able to look at this in the video and see other versions as well. But this is a nice sort of flow chart for thinking about how the evaluation process would take place, and looking at different things like prerequisites, usability, curriculum fit, cost, and it's a nice decision tree. And again, as we talked about in some of the evaluation frameworks, one of the challenges with using one, sometimes really just going through the exercise of filling out one of those frameworks is enough to help you really think about what you want to choose in the end. But sometimes what happens in those cases is you wind up having some bias, and you wind up choosing the thing that you think you're going to choose just because you look at those measures and you sort of think about what you're going to do. So having a nice framework with this, which is a little bit more rigid, really sort of helps you sometimes get out of that original thing, the original thoughts that you had, and really might help open up your mind to other kinds of solutions as you evaluate them along the way. BLACKBOARD was a leading candidate, and you can see here that some of the reasons that were evaluated. Again, this is sort of looking at what are some of the really important aspects to the software, and these details really matter. I'm not going to go through what the details are, but as you're evaluating these technologies, thinking about those details does really matter. And it matters because when there's something in there that just doesn't work, and you're thinking about sort of implementing this, the people just reject it in favor of whatever the status quo was before. So really thinking about those details is really quite important. As I mentioned earlier, thinking about some of the barriers, there really are a lot of barriers. And the barriers to this particular solution have things to do with what I mentioned earlier about the internet, and it's nice tying back the specifics here of, okay, now we have a solution under evaluation. Mention those barriers up front, but let's really think about how those things are going to play out as implementation happens. But there's also opportunities, and this is a nice balancing act of thinking about the challenges and the opportunities. As most technologies will have, there will be both of those, and thinking about those, you have to think about which one wins, and whether that might mean in a framework for evaluating one technology versus another, it may sort of tip the balance to one technology. But sometimes what happens is the challenges may be greater than the opportunities on all the technologies that you evaluate, and you have to think about, okay, well, either we need to go back to the drawing board, so to speak, and think about other technology solutions, or we might need to think about a non-technological solution. Implementation process, this is where the rubber meets the road, really thinking about how this actually happens, and it's nice to see all the different steps of this process. So here it's implementation, and thinking about everything from teachers to the Department of Education, and how those different players might be involved. Evaluation, thinking about these guiding questions, really important to think about, and that's why we stressed it in this course, because that evaluation that you have at the end really can help you determine whether this is successful and either worth continuing or scaling, or changing for that matter, and thinking about some of these questions right from the start, and not just after the fact is very important. And the kind of data that can ultimately support those is also really helpful. So reflection here, and there's actually more in the video, which is really nice. Thinking about the challenge of creating this plan. Target environment was something that Brian was very familiar with, and ultimately the solution that he chose was one that has definitely trade-offs within it. It's not a perfect solution, but it may be the thing that ultimately is worth trying. So really nice evaluation, a really nice full step through of all the different steps that we went through in the course, and put together in this nice final project. I'm gonna ask Liz if I missed anything important in there that she wants to comment on.
Hi, Eric. Sorry, let me look at my sound. Hey. So, I just want to say, I think you got most of the points. I liked how Brian and I kind of referenced the iPad when we talked about barriers. I thought that was a good approach. And did you have anything to say regarding evaluation questions or anything to add on that? respect?
Me or the audience here? Are we opening that up to the audience?
So I guess you.
No, I don't. I think it was a nice framework, and thinking about those evaluation questions from the start is definitely the way to make sure that your evaluation is ultimately valuable to you and the partners that you're working with.
Okay.
I don't see any questions here.
So let's see. Yeah, I had one more comment on that. Eric, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Great. So my comment is he had something that was a little bit pretty general. He said, how well did the developed programs in terms of course content, activities, and assessment processes work out? I'd like to see him just have a little bit more specificity regarding outcomes that he'd like from the implementation of this. That's the only thing I would add.
Sure. Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and for those of you that are listening in, so we pointed out the showcase, which is along the side, those funny price tags. There is also along the side there, if you found the showcase from that you get to it again by the little nine grids in the upper right, which should open up a little menu on the side, and you should see a bunch of different options. But you'll see the showcase. You should also see Q&A, which is actually labeled Q&A, which is nice. And you can certainly use that to go ahead and ask us any questions that you have. It doesn't look like we have any right now. I'm going to go ahead and add the next item to the showcase. If you please stand by. I'm going to hide the first one then so we don't get confused as to which one's which, because I think on your sidebar there in the showcase it will simply just look like sign into edX. And if you have signed into edX and you have signed into the forums, clicking on that link should take you straight through. If you click on that and you're not signed in, sign in and come back here and click it again. I'm going to bring up some of the stuff here from Mrs. Placed Soul. And I'm going to bring up this document here. All right, I'm going to try to share that with you all in a second. Okay, so hopefully you can see this. This is Mrs. Placed Soul talking again. I mentioned earlier the nice diversity of different kinds of environments that we've seen and challenges that people have seen in the kinds of implementation that they've talked about. So what I'll mention here is that this one is about expanding it's a low-income community. Parents and young children under 3, if I remember correctly, and the idea is to have kids and parents sort of play together with educational toys, and it's a project that goes on in the Washington D.C. Public Library, and the goal is to expand this program to include some apps as well, and so that parents and children can play along together with some educational apps, and the challenges here are again many and radically different than the last one that we viewed. So thinking about this, thinking about how people access the technology, thinking about how you choose the technology, what kinds of balance you have in terms of the kinds of applications that you choose and how those might be appropriate for a kid and or a parent, cost. There's so many different dimensions here. So this is first thinking about the technology. There's things like cost and quantity and upkeep and how you evaluate those. Accessories, training, content availability, usage. It's a really nice sort of thinking about what are the categories here. But there's a nice discussion as to why do this at all? Why do this with technology? Why consider expanding a program? So this is like we can think about a lot of other educational contexts where we might have teachers already working in classrooms with kids without technology. This is a chance to expand that with technology. And again, we should always evaluate why that's the case. Oops, I will zoom this to make it a little bit larger for those of you who can't see it already. So here we go, adding technology. This is a Google Doc. It looks like many of you have clicked on the link as well, so you can see this. I can see here anonymous cheetah and anonymous sheep and anonymous chinchilla, for example, have joined in looking at this. Looking at how this is going to really improve teaching and learning. That's really the ultimate goal, is really thinking about how it does improve teaching and learning, and thinking about what are the big challenges. This is a phrase, and I think I give Liz credit for this. What does awesome look like? I think maybe one of our speakers has talked about this as well. It's really a nice way of thinking about what our goals are in the classroom. And so hopefully this helped you frame some of your stuff as well. It looks like Mrs. Place Soul was able to use this as well. Part 3 was the implementation, thinking about the barriers. Nice job here sort of thinking about those and how those sort of line up with the opportunities. Thinking very specifically about the implementation and how that's going to go, and then now into evaluation, thinking about what are the right questions here to evaluate, and this is a case here where evaluation means can mean lots of different things. Where you're able to actually successfully get the apps and use the technology, and also were they effective, and all those things really need to be considered here. So that is both things you can evaluate somewhat objectively based on the technological criteria, as well as things that you have to do ultimately through interviews and surveys with the participants. In this case, the participants will presumably be the parents and the librarians, and not the little children who you may not be able to get very good answers from. So I will now ask Liz to add anything that she would like to on this one.
Hi, Eric. Thanks so much. I just want to clarify that what does awesome look like is totally Justin Reich. It is not me, so I cannot take credit for that. So just a few things to add. I thought one thing that was pretty challenging about this implementation is she's talking about getting people set up regarding hardware and also software, and having the library recommend certain apps. So that's one thing that's makes this implementation a little bit complicated. And also because of that, if recommended for different types of learning or for different types of subjects, trying to figure out kind of what impact these apps will have in the lives of these kids is going to be challenging. So I just wanted to add that. I do think that this did a great job just kind of thinking through this, and I know this is something she'll still be working on in the future as well.
So there's just some logistical questions here. We can also, so this is if you want to look for Mrs. Placed Soul, you can find hers in the forums. People are just asking how to get these things. If you go to if you're signed in and you go to the showcase, you should be able to get to her document, and within her post, there's a link to the formatted post. I think I might be able to link directly to that here as well. Hang on one second, and I'll try to do that for you. This is the part where Liz can sing a little song for us while I'm copying and pasting.
Okay. Okay, let's see. I also could put the links on out as a course update. Do you think that would be easier? Should I do that?
Yeah, we'll put them in the course forums as well later. But I just posted a link now directly to that project, the Google Doc, so you can see that Google Doc directly, as well as the post if you go through edX. I'm going to go back and see what we have in terms of questions here. So that's I answered that first one, I think, of where do I find the document. So that's now in the showcase, which is that yellow set of tabs that are on the left. Up, and Carol also posted some of the stuff in there.
To the document as well.
Yep. So I'll go ahead and while other people are sort of looking at some of these and thinking about other questions, I'll answer some of the more logistics here. So there's a question on will we be able to access the course resources after the course has ended? And the answer is yes. For some time, all the course materials will be available, including the forums. So you'll be able to get in there and you'll be able to continue to participate in there. At some point, if I recall, you cannot register for the course anymore. But since you are presumably asking this question to register for the course, you'll be able to have access to those materials for quite some time afterwards. We'll maintain sort of some presence, at least in the forums, for a while. And we'll keep the forums themselves open for at least a couple months beyond the end of the course. And the archived materials will stay up, I think, for quite a bit longer than that as well. That relates to another logistical question here. That this course is indeed part of a series. We are hoping, and I would say at this point planning, to re-offer design and development of educational technology, which was our first course in this series. We're hoping to relaunch that in the early part of 2016, so hopefully in January. We'll do it as a slightly refreshed version, so if you've taken it, it probably won't be very new, but if you haven't taken it, we'll do some refreshing to make sure that we stay current. And some things that we've encountered across the last 6-9 months, we'll want to include those as well. So we will hopefully be doing an update of that and rerunning that in the early part of the year. Other questions in here? I think that's it for questions so far.
Eric, can I jump in?
Please. Go ahead, Liz.
Eric, I was hoping you could talk a little bit about developing questions for evaluation in general. I know that this is one thing that our participants a lot, and it's also hard. It's hard to figure out to develop the questions you need for evaluation. So I was hoping you could talk a little bit about that. I'm sorry,
I actually missed your beginning of your question.
I was wondering, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about developing questions for evaluation. I know that's one thing that our participants are working hard on, and it's a difficult part. It's a difficult part of the project, and it's tricky to do.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly don't have any magic formula, and that's part of the challenge here in coming up with these questions for evaluation. So a lot of it will depend on how you're planning on getting your data. Is it going to be questions you sort of ask your participants that are working on your technology? Is it going to be things that you evaluate based on numbers? Sort of having some sort of mix of those things is awfully nice. Ultimately you want to be able to, and we thought about asking some questions like this. Ultimately, you want to think about if you actually gave this all over to somebody else. And you were just simply reading something and you were trying to evaluate whether this was useful to you, would the questions that you have in your evaluation help you really make the decisions that you need to make? So those are the kinds of things you want to look to evaluate. Are those going to really influence what you think or what you believe about the efficacy of the implementation as you're doing it? So it is really important to think about. There isn't sort of a template for these kinds of things. But you can, and that's why we put up some of the examples that we did from, I think there's one of the ones from Labyrinth, and there was one other one as well from one of our guests who also posted an evaluation of informal learning context. So looking through those can also help you think about the kinds of questions that you would like to have in there. And certainly copying and pasting those is not necessarily going to work because your context might be a lot different. But what it might do is help you think about an analogous question for your environment that you might be able to use. Here's some questions coming in. Is there? I'll select this one. Is there a mechanism to submit suggestions RE course content? You will notice that in the forums now that Liz has set up a nice course feedback form, as I recall. I'll make sure I'm not lying about that.
I did.
Yes.
There's a course feedback form.
There's a course feedback form. It should be at the top of your forums now. And we do welcome feedback in there. I can say that from some of our past courses, we have definitely taken suggestions and used some of that feedback, both sometimes in terms of process. Some people will say, well, could you have posted things earlier or later, or change the schedule? You'll notice that, for example, one of the things we've done in this course is we've made things into units. So we don't necessarily have weeks. We've made units because we know that some of the content takes longer than 1 week. And that was really based on feedback from one of our previous courses. So we definitely listened to that. And we're trying to learn from what your experience is. So we do welcome that feedback. Please give that to us. We already have one of those suggestions. We should make sure that we give out some of these links beforehand, so that those are in the you guys can have read some of these things before we have the discussion. So we'll make sure that we do that for next time. I'll keep picking some of these questions here. Well, the forum topics. Will forum topics be used for further courses? I saw a few interesting topics which would have been nice if they were integrated into the course. So again, if there's particular topics that percolate from that, I would suggest sort of bringing some of those to our attention in the course feedback, so we don't miss those. It'd be nice to be able to see some of that if there are particular units. So if we do rerun this course, or maybe sometimes some of those topics might be interesting for the design development of educational technology that we are hopefully running in the spring or winter, that we can integrate it into there, or may already be integrated into there. So please sort of bring those to our attention in that course feedback section. Just looking through some of the questions. This is an interesting question here. So there's a question here on if we apply data analytics to technology implementation in education. So this is something we discussed more in some of our previous courses, certainly the design course, and in the educational games course as well, 11.127x, where when we're looking to design technology, we think about what are kinds of data that they can collect and what kind of information they can provide us. This may be relevant, in fact, in terms of some of the work that you're doing. That sometimes the software that you might choose might actually provide you with some of that feedback. So that might be information that you might help use as part of your own evaluation. You might be able to use some of that data. Did it really make a difference in student learning? You could look at simple usage data from some of those sorts of things. Patterns of usage that might sort of help you not sort of say yay or nay to a technology, but might change the way you actually implement it. It might change your implementation plan. But we do think about that, and it's certainly a hot topic now in the development of educational technology more generally, how we use data and what kind of data we collect. And I will say that my personal perspective, and I think this was we talked a lot about this in some of the previous courses, is that there's one method which is like we just collect everything, we run some analytics, and we hope to find patterns there. Another is we sort of have some particular hypotheses or some particular theories about what students are learning, how they should be learning, and maybe where they might be not learning. And we look for sort of data detectors that are particular about those particular elements, and we focus on those things, and then we provide feedback around those particular things that we have hypotheses around. For the most part, I'm an advocate of that method, where we really think about what's the data we want to collect, how are we going to collect that data, and what is that data going to mean when we get it out. rather than simply just collecting every mouse click and hoping that we can sort of use some post-hoc analytics to try to make sense of that data. But again, when you're evaluating software or technologies that are collecting some of that data for you, it can be useful data. Obviously, the one that most people look at right now is simple, just traffic. Who came, when did they come, how long did they spend here? That can help you think about, it's a good first pass on, if nobody comes, doesn't matter whether the software is great or not. That can give you some insight into how it's being used or when it's being used. Looking through questions again. I'll keep waiting here for some other questions to percolate. Maybe I'll turn it back to you, Liz. There were a couple other projects that we thought we might sort of just point out a couple particular aspects of, if not the whole project.
Sure, Eric. Can you load up balance project in the showcase, and also Carol Q&A? I'll give her the link.
Yep, I'll post it in the showcase. I'll get rid of this one for now because that'll be confusing.
Eric, were you able to add it?
Sort of. I did, but now my Q&A is, my showcase is locked up. I'll try to come back into it here. Sorry about that, folks. Okay.
I asked Carol to put it into the Q&A as well, so that should
I've now shared it. I've now shared it in the showcase as well, so people should be able to see it in the showcase. It's the last link there. It's underneath the document. It's another edX link.
What?
It's another edX link. It should be underneath the previous document in the showcase. Or maybe it's not. People aren't seeing it. I think it just takes a little while to percolate to everybody's browser.
Carol said she added it.
Okay.
Okay, so Balint has been doing some really interesting work in Hungary regarding a project that helps with learning things like physics and electrical engineering. And he's also developed some tutorials and also some curriculum as well. Parts of this project were just a little bit tricky for me to understand due to some issues with English, though I could get the main ideas across. I would definitely check out this project just to check out his work in general, to see kind of where Balint is thinking and how he's worked through the development of this. Right now, this seems to be pretty much his project. So he goes into schools, he's been working on implementing this. So even though there's a number of things that need to be fleshed out regarding this project and regarding the implementation, specifically in the evaluation section, I noticed that he wants to survey students, maybe do a pre-course, a pre-implementation and a post-implementation survey, but he hasn't necessarily finalized all the concepts he wants to test or survey the students about. So I just hope the participants can take a look at this project because it is pretty interesting. Eric, did you have anything to add?
No. I thought it was nice. As people are taking multiple online courses, it's nice to sort of see people sort of stringing these things together and using one thing from one course and bringing it into another course. It's the way we build knowledge and the way we sort of do things on campus. And sometimes it's hard to think about the ways that we're doing that in our online courses. And it's nice to see people figuring out two courses that may not be necessarily linked in terms of their content and figuring out ways to make the connections between those. So I was pleased to see that.
Okay, Eric, I thought we'd maybe look at one more, and I will do a screen share for this one. Does that sound okay?
Sounds good.
Okay. Thanks for your patience. I'm just getting this all set here.
While you're getting that set, I will take. There was a question here. I'll take this question. Oops, sorry, that's not the one I wanted to take.
Okay, I'm gonna.
That is a great one, though.
What? Sorry.
I clicked on the wrong question. But Paul Sakian, who actually gave some nice feedback on the Playdate case that we pointed out earlier, did also point out that in fact that there should be drool-proof cases for these devices that can be disinfected after use. And I will say one of my earlier activities in the space of educational technology, back when I was in grad school, I worked. This was many years ago when I worked in preschools and some kindergartens and elementary schools, doing after school and extracurricular computer education. And we would bring these big computers. They were not really laptops at the time, but you'd bring a Mac around, a big Mac, and it had a keyboard on it and a mouse, and the kids would drool and sneeze and everything else all over those items. That year that I did that job, I think I had the flu and cold more than I've ever had before. So that was having the idea of drool-proof and disinfectable cases seems like a good idea.
Eric, am I screen sharing what the page here of Sedipta's plan? I just want to make sure it's working right.
Yes, I see it. Perfect.
Okay, so this project, and I think Carol has got it in the Q&A, is from Sudipta Kumar Roy. And I wanted to take a look just at this first page here. I know it maybe isn't as clear as it is ideally, but what I like is this person kind of thought about the whole project holistically. So they thought about first deciding on the purpose, they talked about this planning and implementation and on to evaluation. So I just wanted to give you a minute to take a look at that. So, and this is still high level. So obviously, there's questions here that need to be answered, and there's also the intermediate sort of steps are skipped. Eric, anything to add here?
Not from me.
Okay, well, I'll give people just another second to look at that, and then I think we can continue on with Q&A if that sounds good.
Yep, I found the question that I was actually trying to click on.
I've also enlarged it. Sorry, I didn't do that previously. Here we go. Okay, do we have any additional questions?
There was a nice question here on just in general. This is sort of background on the course, and since this is a different format, I'll take this question. So how much support does your institution provide allocating time and resources towards this course? Is this a labor of love or ... So I will say that as I mentioned earlier, this is one of 4 courses, the 4th of 4 courses that we've offered in this EdTech X sequence. And the original idea was twofold. So one was MOOCs were starting to take off. This was about a year and a half, almost 2 years ago now. And I thought this is a medium that I really want to explore. Maybe something that I thought was useful, might be something that was just hype, or it might be something that's left to be explored and learned from. And so I thought the only way to really do that was to create a course. And so my goal was to create one course. That one course quickly turned into 4 courses. And here we are a year and a half later, almost 2 years later, and we're completing the 4th of those. So that was part of my original idea. The other was that I felt like this was an idea that came up as I was sort of entering sabbatical, and I thought, well, I could write a book about some of the work that we do and reach maybe some people that way, and spread the word about some of the work that we're doing or some of the ideas that we propose. Or we could sort of try this new medium as a way of reaching a diverse audience of people to try to deliver a similar kind of message. And so I thought, well, this is really an opportunity to try a different medium for delivering that message, and that was what got us started here. We were pretty early on in the development of MOOCs as we amongst the first courses that we created. Now we're sort of in the thick of things, and so MIT was quite generous in helping to support those with a videographer, money for a videographer, someone to sort of design the course and run the course. And most recently to provide Liz to help run this course and design this course as well. So they've been actually very generous in doing that. I will say for my own time though, that's pretty much donated. And this is just one of the projects that I've taken on as something that I have interest in, and so I really treat this as sort of one of my research projects that I'm pursuing, trying to think about what can we learn, what kind of influence can we have through educational technologies as we deliver these courses. So it's something which is both a chance to hopefully inform and engage, but also to think about some of the questions we're interested in how we inform and engage in a continued way around some of the ideas that we're passionate about.
Eric, I wasn't sure if we should talk a little bit about the process of making MOOCs and sort of how we film and the fact that we edit the footage, that sort of stuff. Did you want to comment on that?
Yeah. So getting back to that, it's really part of the design philosophy we had was we wanted to do this if we could sort of have control over the way that we did it and be able to explore some of the ideas we were interested in. Some of those were around the way we produced the video. We did it a little bit differently this time, but one of the key aspects was really trying to be able to do video with experts in the field. So I'm one of those experts, but I'm one among many of those experts. So I wanted my voice to be in here, but I also wanted the voices of other really great people out in the field to be able to participate, and that models the way that I work. I sort of have one area of expertise that I bring to the table, and all the people who you've seen throughout this course bring other areas of expertise to the table. And so when I work on projects, whether it's about implementing something or doing some research, I work with one or more of these people who you've seen across this course. So I wanted to be able to model that. I wanted to be able to bring those voices in, and as much as possible, try to do it as a dialogue. We've had a little bit less of that that we're trying this semester, but we've tried to do a lot of dialogue. So Garrett, who's our great videographer, some people I've gone other places and people have asked us, how many people do you have doing the videos? And it's really just one. It's one really talented person who's done a really great job of making the videos, I think, engaging and keeping our costs under control, because the video costs that a lot of people put into these with 3-camera studios and can really run up very quickly. And I think actually the video that we do is really it's situated more in terms of the kinds of dialogue that we really have when we're having conversations amongst experts, and I think it's in a lot of ways more authentic. So so that's part of what we do. We do often we ask questions, but we do shoot maybe an hour of video and only use in many cases, depending on the topic and the person, we might use 5 or 10 minutes of that. For other people, you know, it might be of that hour, we might use most of it, but it might be cut up into different pieces. We might use 5 or 10 minutes in each of several courses. So that's our production process, but we do sort of lay things out. We have a sort of an arc, a trajectory for how the course is going to go. We find the experts who we think can deliver some of those insights, and then film all that and then edit that down into these smaller sections. And it's a bit of an iterative process in terms of how we design the activities. Liz has been thinking about each week what should we include in terms of the activity breaks as well as the particular assignments. We had a general arc of the assignments outlined, but as the experts who we interview provide additional insights, we like to allow ourselves to be able to change that, particularly as we think about how those all mesh together each week. We also like to think about those are creating interesting combinations and contrasts. What might an activity break that sort of highlights some of those look like, and what might we do in that? So that's in general what our production process has been like.
Eric, I don't know if you want to say a little bit about how we kind of evaluate our own MOOCs and how we see how we're doing.
That's a good question, and hopefully we at least practice some of what we preach. So certainly, you know, all these courses, including us, you know, we certainly look at who's coming in, when they're coming in, how often they're coming in, whether they come back again, and some of that is pretty looks pretty standard. Although we've seen quite a bit differences between our courses, and I think that's where some of the interesting insights come from. So not necessarily how many people came and when did they come, but how is it different when we ran our course on design development of games and one almost at the same time in design development of educational technology. So 2 courses running just sort of offset in the fall by several weeks, and we had very different audiences in terms of age, in terms of educational background, in terms of goals, in terms of the kinds of activities they persisted in within the course. And I think that's interesting to me to think about, okay, what are the things that we did? That could be the topic, it could be the kinds of activities we asked people to engage in, but thinking about how those differences, what are the differences in the course's content and perspectives, and how those ultimately result in different kinds of audience engagement, that's, to me, quite interesting. And that's really just a matter of looking at some of the data in terms of who used what. But also what we look at is some of the smaller outcomes. You know, these are massive courses, but in some ways, if we see a small number of people making big differences at the other side of these courses, it feels all worthwhile. Same thing, I think, when I teach a course on campus. You know, it's great when everybody gives an applause in the class, or I get great course evaluations. But when a student who comes to me and says, you know, wow, this has really changed my perspective, I'm going to do it, I'm going to have a different career, or sometimes comes back later and shows me some of the work that they've done in that career, that's really what makes all the difference. And I think it's the same case here. We look at some of those cases of people who, what the work that they did within the course, and how we see that work change over time, the kinds of feedback that they give us in terms of that, how that work went and where they're going to go with that next. And sometimes it's very specific. You know, I actually implemented this plan. I actually started a project to try to develop this educational technology or this game. So some of those, while those are, you know, oftentimes small numbers, it's really interesting to see how those particular cases really make a difference in some people's lives. Here's another question: Has any of the content produced for these courses been recognized as having additional value and repurposed elsewhere? So I'll answer that in a couple different ways. So one is we've repurposed some of this material. We've run, and some of you may have heard of SPOCs, which are special private online courses. But the idea is that there's something like MOOCs, but they're for a smaller, closed audience. It might be dozens of people, or maybe 100 people or so. And the idea is you moderate this. It's a community of people who you know and invite. And we actually just did that with some of the material for the design development of educational technology. We were running a workshop for some partners we're working with on a project, and there were a few dozen people who were interested, and so we were able to sort of take that content, repurpose it for this course. It's people who they took the course for about a month online, and then we met face-to-face for about 2 weeks. So different model, but we were able to use that material for that purpose. I know that other people have showed individual videos elsewhere, and we've had some inquiries on people using some of these videos in their own courses. And it's something we're certainly interested to explore. We have to sort of see how that plays out, but it's something we're interested to explore. Again, our goal is really to hopefully, influence as many people. We've put the production into these courses. We hope it has as much value as possible. So if people are interested in those kinds of things, they should certainly talk to us about that so that we can explore those models and see how they might play out. I'll look at this question here. And to my previous question, one post was, is EdTech actually solving your school's problem? A poor school might benefit from better teachers instead of. So it is really interesting the way we think about educational technology, and certainly it's the case that we shouldn't assume that technology will solve all of our problems, and that we should necessarily go to technological problems first. I will say though that in a lot of cases, you can also have the opposite take place. You might say, well, we can always add an extra teacher, and that always seems like a good idea, and I agree that that's the case. But at some point, there may be the case where you say, hey, there's the technology itself. If we're trying to educate, certainly in certain populations, certain education levels, having technological facilities is going to be really important for our students. And so thinking about integrating that technology in a way that they become familiar with it, become empowered by it, and ultimately become be able to thrive based on that technology is something that's also going to be important for the success of students in a lot of different environments. So we have to think about how do we ultimately decide to get that technology involved in there. So sometimes we can keep putting it off because there's always something that's more pressing. But sometimes the technology is important to integrate for its own sake, to make sure that people are developing the technological skills that they need. That said, not every educational technology implementation, or many educational technology implementations, won't help in those regards. So if that is your goal, to really make sure that your students in your population are tech savvy in a way that's not just a matter of knowing how to look things up on Wikipedia and YouTube, but really being masters of that educational technology or that technology, it's important to make sure that your practices and your implementation model those practices. Ooh, this is a good question. If you were to employ someone considering educational qualifications, would you hire somebody who has mainly taken MOOC courses, or one who has gone through a physical classroom learning? It's a really good question, and I think it's something that a lot of people are going to be considering in the coming years. I certainly wouldn't throw away a resume that only had sort of self-guided learning on it. I would want to make sure that in a lot of ways, someone who's motivated to learn those things on themselves, on their own, is certainly what I look for, and I think a lot of people look for. You look for people who have particular sets of skills for a job, but one of the most important skills is knowing how to learn, and making sure that you've learned how to learn, because as Liz may tell you, she's had to learn many new things across the production of these courses. And that's super important to be able to do, is to know how to find those resources, how to find those people, and where to go to do those. And I think being able to sort of be a self-guided learner through MOOCs is also important. You have to develop those important skills. That said, it's also important to be able to show that you have sustained learning, that you have things to show for that learning, you have projects, you have people who you've worked with and developed significant relationships with. And that's a little bit harder to do in a MOOC than it is on a physical classroom setting, where you have some more of that guidance, you have some more people who you've worked with in a long-term way, you have some of those relationships, you have some of those projects that you've pursued perhaps in those cases. So, I think it's easier to get in those physical classroom settings, and also from those physical classroom settings, it's easier to get people who can verify, often through letters of recommendation, or verbal recommendations can sort of testify to your capabilities. But if you can do those other things, if you can sort of sustain your learning and develop significant projects, have relationships with people who can vouch for you, then I think people who come through those non-traditional routes certainly should have a good chance.
So I can't believe it's 8 o'clock now. Eric, do you have some closing comments, or maybe one more question you want to take a look at before we close out?
I'll take a look. Sorry, I'm just quickly looking here. I have some nice kudos in here. I'll just give us some kudos. Thank you. I really appreciate that positive feedback. I guess there's one last question here at the very top, which is about. It seems to have gone now. There was a question about how do we actually work as a team. We are a physical team. We work in the same offices for the most part, but people are sort of all over the place doing their work, we use a lot of collaborative tools. So in this course, I'll say that Google Docs has been really great. It's been a way for us to organize our information, to be able to share it. Not so much in this course, but in the previous courses, we were all over the country getting interviews from folks, so we had to make sure that they had those documents and they could share those in advance. FedEx was another one of our important education collaborative facilities. We were able to FedEx our film equipment all over the country. But Google Docs has been really effective. It's simple, it's easy to use. In some of our other projects, we do use more significant project management software, where we have deliverables and timelines. But in these courses, we were able to sort of track things primarily through Google Docs. That includes being able to get documents, scripts directly from Google Docs onto our iPad-based teleprompter, which is I think our most significant technological advance within this course. That's been it's been really great for me. It may look like I'm doing it all ad lib, but it's when we do some of those pieces in the famous tiled room that you may have seen many times. Many of those are scripted. I did a few of those ad lib towards the end, but many of those are scripted. So with that, I'll say thank you for tuning in today. Thank you for tuning into the course. I've really enjoyed engaging with all of you today and seeing all the great work that you're doing within the course. And some of you have asked, either just joining recently or maybe lagging a little bit behind. The course will be fully active and open, and you're welcome to keep taking it certainly for several weeks to come. I think we've usually left them open and fully active for at least 6 to 8 weeks. So if you're coming late, please feel free to participate. Hopefully other people are going to be active in the forums in a continued way, so you'll be able to get some feedback. Can be a little bit hit or miss as you get quite a bit later. But there will be people continuing, I know, for quite a number of weeks. So hopefully they'll be able to continue to engage. So thanks, and thanks to Liz and Carol, who's behind the scenes on making this possible. Liz, are you saying goodbye, or are you just going to wave?
Oh, I'm saying goodbye. I also want to say our community course TA, John, has also been here as well. And thanks so much. I think we're ready to close out when you are, Eric.
Great. Thanks, everybody.